Love You to Death, Stan Kraychik Mystery, Book 2. Writer Grant Michaels, publisher St. Martin's Press, New York, 1992. Narrator Eric Aust. Chapter 15. Cherchez la femme. Back at Snips, Nicole had bought Tobias another new toy, an exotic spatial creativity construction set from Sweden. It bore no resemblance to the toys of my youth, where construction sets were limited to piles of tiny plastic bricks or miniature wooden logs or dowels and multi-holed spools. Though the butch boys and the tomboys did get to tinker with perforated metal strips and screws and gears. But what Nicole had found for Tobias was a container full of small plastic beads of infinite colors and of 3 basic styles: male, female, and hermaphroditic. Kind of an updated version of the old puppet beads. The point, apparently, was to interconnect the beads and create a mesh-like 3-dimensional forms of any shape or size. Tobias's creation that day, a large soiled rod that fit snugly into a matching cylinder. When he'd completed his masterpiece, he pumped the rod in and out so that its beaded surface rubbed noisily against the bumpy lining of the cylinder. The little monster was taking great pleasure in annoying and embarrassing both patrons and workers in the salon. And I finally understood one of the so-called dangers of sex education. The playful and innocent fantasies of a young mind might be too disturbing to the calcified experiences of the cynical adult. To me, naive soul that I am, it was simply nature in action. How else was a multi-celled organism going to survive unless its genetic programming persisted with the tried and true rod and tunnel algorithm? Seeing his progressive aptitude with toys, I remarked to Nicole, "Perhaps it's time to teach him how to read." "Too late," was her quick reply. "He's already wormed his way through a few of my volumes." "Picture books?" "Some." "Can he actually read?" "He follows with his finger, but he doesn't move his lips." "Maybe he's faking. Some people are pretty good pretenders." "He struggles, darling, but he makes almost perfect sense when he reads aloud." I wondered if Tobias's intelligence should be guided and nurtured more carefully. Maybe there's a place for gifted children we can send him. "Stanley, do you know what those places charge?" "Couldn't he get a scholarship from the Snips Charitable Trust?" "Charity begins at home, Stanley, which for the time being is chez vous." "Doll, can't you at least use the familiar form toi? Toi vos?" "Then," she said, "you have a customer." I went to work on a familiar head of curly dark brown hair. The young woman who owned it had spent years trying to chemically relax the natural curl. When that proved futile, she opted to keep it short, below the curl line. When she finally came to me, I offered another solution. Wi-Fi nature, I suggested that she abstained from chemicals and let the hair grow out. A masterful layered cut would use the hair's own weight to help keep a style in the desired shape. An added bonus was the liveliness and springiness exuded by happy hair that is pampered instead of chemically disciplined. During a free moment, I checked the appointment book, which showed another short break in my schedule that afternoon. Just when I wanted to see, I planned to slip out unseen by Nicole in my absence. Ramon could handle any walk-ins. It would be good for him to learn to handle all contingencies, especially if he intended to usurp my position. So when Nicole took Tobias out for a late lunch, I followed them shortly after. My destination? Charlestown and the Gladys Gardner World Chocolate Headquarters. Alas, my field trip was interrupted at the offset. Waiting outside the shop at Newbury Street, straddling a big red motorcycle, was Rafik. He was dressed in high leather boots, jeans, jacket, gauntlets, and cap, all shiny black in the silvery afternoon light of an overcast winter sky. He waved to me and beckoned me with a large gloved hand. Naturally, I went. He was grinning. "When I will see you again?" "You see me now." "I mean, together, like last night." You were so eager to leave. It's not true. See how I feel. He laid his big, black-gloved hand on the inside of his thigh, where the leather was indiscreetly being stretched from underneath. Not here, Rafik, I said, but I was pleased that his love barometer indicated fair weather ahead. Still, I wasn't ready for a round of boy toy jousting in front of the shop in the midday light. Rafik, what happened with Danny? He started the motorcycle. Get on. Tell me. He shook his head. Get on. What's a fella to do? I got on. Where you are going now? He asked. Charlestown, the chocolate factory. I take you, he said. Hold here. He placed my arms around his waist and pressed them firmly into his belly. He turned his head back to me, winked, and added, Come ga. Then, without another word, he pulled the big red machine out into traffic and hauled us off toward Charlestown. Just before we turned onto Starro Drive, at the stoplight, he moved my arms lower down so that I was holding onto him below the belt line. The whole experience, the powerful engine roaring beneath us, the breathtaking speed at which he drove, the firm strength of his body in my arms, the scent of his leather garments, the memory of him in bed. It was all simply sex. At the factory, he let me off outside the parking lot on the street. Why don't you drive in? I asked. He shook his head. Maybe they tell the police. Maybe they say I killed Duddy. Did you? No. Then what happened? If I tell you, you will hate me. What I hate are lies, Rafik. He stared at me. He looked down. He looked back at me. He looked away, back to me, opened his lips, smiled. I tell you, Stani, I trust you. Ah, the dark-eyed charmer. He hesitated another moment, then got off the bike. He stood before me, faced me directly, and said, I make love with Dani before they kill him. Did I have the right to ask why? Does anyone? I want to show him I still care, even if he hate me. The original kiss of death. Then you must know who killed them, Rafik. No, we were alone. Mr. Kingsley was running. You didn't see anyone? No, I leave him before we make love. Like with me. He paused, weighing how much he should say. No, he said, not like you. Then he almost snarled. Dunny say I rape him. Did you? I was sounding like Nicole now. I don't rape him, c'est fini. C'est dead, Rafik. He pulled me close to him and thrust his hips hard against mine, right there on the street in Charleston, where the daylight and the sounds around us were eclipsed by our closeness, our warmth, our breath, our mouth, and the scent and texture of black leather. All that remains from the other world was the wind in our ears. When he pulled away and broke the spell, he said, I am sorry for him. So am I. As I let go of him, I felt a hard, heavy object under his jacket, just below his shoulder. With a shudder, I realized it was a gun. Why do you have that? I asked. To protect us. From what? If they kill Dunny, maybe they kill me or you. Are you sure you didn't use it yourself recently? I asked as if he would tell me the truth. Ah, none, he said with that trademark smile of his. I protect you, Stani. Then he zoomed away on his red metal steed. I zigzagged unsteadily through the parking lot toward the factory, swooning slightly from all that had just happened. On the way, I spotted John Lau. Getting into his car, I snapped myself back to alertness and ran towards him, calling out. He turned, looked my way, squinted, frowned, then got into his car. Maybe he didn't remember me, but that wasn't about to stop me from talking to him. I got his car just as he'd settled in and had fastened his seatbelt. I knocked on the window. He looked back through the tinted glass with frightened eyes. It's important, I said. He stared at me for a moment, then reluctantly he lowered the window. Only then did his face soften. I'm sorry, he said. I didn't recognize you. One can't be too careful in this neighborhood. You never know who might accost you. I'd like to talk to you. He seemed to be in a hurry. I hope it's not about that incident the other day. It depends on which incident you're referring to. You and your nephew. I apologize to both of you, and as far as I'm concerned, the matter is settled. That's not why I'm here, Mr. Lau. Then what do you want? I don't have much time. Do you have time for murder? What do you mean by that? Dan Darity was killed out at your brother's place on Abigail yesterday. I thought you might know something about it. I most certainly do not. Young man, I don't even believe you. If such a thing did happen, Prentice would have notified me. It did happen, Mr. Lau, and the mechanic in Abigail said he saw you in town yesterday. He started the car and raced the engine, then he put it in gear too soon, causing the big car to jolt sharply against the parking brake. It stalled. I said, "You didn't care much for Danny, did you?" "I don't have time for this," he muttered and started the car again. As he backed the car out of its stall, I followed along, still trying to provoke some facts out of him. "Why did you hate Danny? Were you jealous of Prentice?" He jammed the brake on. "What did you say?" "Maybe you were jealous of your brother's friendship with Dan Dougherty." John Lyle set the parking brake again, then got out of the car and came toward me. "If you insist on insulting me, you'll pay the consequences." "Are you going to kill me too?" "Stop saying that. I didn't kill anybody." "Then why are you acting so guilty?" "I am not acting guilty. The young devil was creating a problem." "What kind of problem?" "You know what I'm talking about." "Refresh my memory." "He was trying to destroy Prentice. He was going about it methodically and persistently. It's no wonder that Prentice was losing his senses. Dan Dougherty and your brother were friends, that's all. Don't try to protect him. I know what kind of things he made Prentice do out there at the summer house. It's an abomination." "Did you see them?" "Yes, I saw them." "Where?" "Everywhere. The way they'd hold onto each other. The way that young man would play up to Prentice. He actually flirted with him like a woman. It was disgusting. He knew Prentice was a confused man and he preyed on him. It's no wonder Prentice finally gave in to the pressure. If the young man is dead now, at least that problem is solved. Things can return to normal." Whatever that means, I thought. One thing isn't solved, though. Dan Dougherty is dead and the killer is free. Sounds to me like you got a good motive. "And you have a big mouth." He opened the car door to get Beck inside, and I grabbed his arm and stopped him. "Mr. Lowe, I talked with the police this morning." He turned and faced me. "So?" "They think Dan Dougherty's death was psychologically motivated and it was a crime of passion. So maybe you did it because you secretly wanted Danny for yourself?" "If you don't keep quiet, I'll..." But he didn't finish his threat. Instead, he braced himself and pulled his arm back, ready to slug me. I backed away, just out of his reach. "You really should confess, Mr. Lau. They give you extra points if you do, and the way I figure it, by killing Danny the way you did, you can probably claim insanity. Then you can serve your sentence in a mental institution instead of a nasty prison. And you wouldn't like prison, believe me. You know what can happen there, don't you? You can end up as somebody's love blossom." "Young man, you'll be hearing from my lawyer shortly. You're the one who should be put away, talking like that." He got into his car and drove away. Meanwhile, I was feeling pretty smug, believing I was already in the home stretch toward nabbing Danny's killer and freeing Lorette. Why then hadn't I felt any danger? Logically, if John Lau had killed Danny, I should have felt some kind of dreadful energy around him. But there was none. Are killers that deceptive? I headed toward the factory, feeling confused. Had I just let Danny's killer go, or was he just some bystander who was implicated because of his family connections? Once inside the factory, I told the security guard I wanted to see Mary Finney. "Mary Finney?" he asked incredulously. I nodded. He seemed surprised that anyone would call on her personally. Having already met her, I'd have to agree with him. Mary Finney wouldn't win any popularity contest among grandmothers or candy makers. She appeared promptly at the guard station with her gnarled face. "Who is it?" she asked the guard, who pointed to me. Mary Finney turned and recognized me immediately. Then she marched toward me with her heavy, thumped tread. I still wondered how such a small person could make so much noise. "What do you want?" she barked. I adopted her blunt style. "Dan Dougherty was killed yesterday." "Who?" "You know who I mean. The designer for La Jardin." "What's it to me?" She turned to walk away, but I hadn't even begun with her. I had to hook her and get her back, and I had to do it fast. I said, "I was just talking to your boyfriend." Mary Finney paused in her steps. "I mean Mr. Lau," I said in mock apology. "He admitted he knew all about Danny's death." Mary Finney looked to see if the guard had overheard me. Then she said, "We'd better talk inside." She led me through the mechanized assembly lines, which were cheerfully producing hundreds of bunnies and chicks and eggs from an insidious brown sludge that resembled industrial waste more than chocolate. She took me to John Lowe's office, the glass-enclosed cubicle that overlooked most of the production floor from all four sides. Through the panes of chocolate-speckled glass, I could see machinery outside whirling and twirling and wrapping masses of brown Easter creatures that would eventually melt and stain and sicken many unsuspecting buyers. In the relative quiet of the office, she said, "When did you talk to John?" "Just now, out in the parking lot. He sure looked guilty when he saw me." "Maybe the sight of you made him sick." "Why are you both pretending not to know about Dan Dougherty's death? Are you in on it together?" "That's a good one. Some queer boy gets killed and you try to blame me. Who sent you here?" "Who else?" I shrugged. "The police." "What?" I continued the lie. "Sure, I'm a deputy detective for the Boston Police. They put me on special assignment for this case." "You?" "Sure, to use your word, a queer gets killed. They figure maybe a queer can help find the killer. We queers come in handy for that kind of thing." Through my queer harangue, Mary Finney was stealthily opening one of the drawers in the desk. Then she reached deep inside, snaking her hand furtively around for something familiar. But her search was futile, and it vexed her. "Where the hell is it?" she said. She crouched down and peered into the far dark reaches of the big drawer. Then she jammed her small arm into the drawer, past the elbow, almost to the shoulder. Still nothing. When she sat up again, she opened another drawer and pulled out a crumpled old pack of unfiltered cigarettes. She lit one and puffed nervously, which quickly filled the air with an acrid, yellowish cloud. "You know," she said through the smoke screen she'd created around herself, "with people like you and that Dougherty boy, it's really no loss. Oh, I know the liberals all make a fuss, saying what they think they're supposed to, all trying to sound like they accept it all, but everyone knows in their hearts that the world's a better place without you and your kind." "That's not a very Christian attitude, Miss Finney." "It's Mrs. Finney. I told you my husband's dead." My sympathy went out to him, since to my mind no mortal could have long survived the Mary Finney conjugal experience. I said, "But can't you see how Dan Dougherty helped the whole company, including you, with all the work he did for La Jourdain? Was I actually defending a dead fairy for his design talents?" "Don't you talk to me about the company. I've been here all my life, ever since Helen Kingsley ran it herself, the way it should have been run. I know what's good for this place, and it isn't some artistic coming in here and changing the way everything looks. What's so good about it? What was wrong with the way things were? I never got what I was entitled to, and now you people all come in and try to take over. Well, we don't need any more nears and fairies here, so get out." Mary Finney gazed over her bifocals with a lizard-like stillness. Part of me wanted to scream at her, even hit her, but then I'd be sinking to her level, wouldn't I? I shook my head sadly. "You're wrong," I said. "No, you're wrong. That little pansy wormed his way into the family and connived to get some of the money when Mr. Kingsley died. That money should go where it rightfully belongs, to John Lowe, Mr. Kingsley's brother." "Half-brother," I corrected. "They had the same father. That makes them brothers. Still, Prentice Kingsley has a right to divide his estate however he wants." "Not if his mind is unsound. Don't you know the first words of a will? Being of sound mind. You have to be of sound mind when you write your will, and that means you don't leave your company to a conniving young gigolo." "Gigolo isn't... Why do you think we've been talking with the lawyers all this time? There was no way we'd let that happen. That boy was evil. I tell you, evil. You all are." "We are not evil." "You are, and you deserve everything you get." Mary Finney got up from the chair. "You get out of here before I have you thrown out. I don't want you in this place again. You poisoned the air just by being here." "You should talk about poison, with that sloppy job you did on the truffles last Sunday." "I'll get a restraining order on you, you and your equal rights. I'm fed up with it. You'll all burn in hell, believe me, I pray for it." I can tell when I'm not welcome, so I left her office. I headed back to the shop, but the ride back on the MTA's Orange Line only got me more depressed. Mary Finney's irrational words and hatred echoed the horrible rantings and abuses of my youth. I thought I'd finally emerged from that dark, doubtful period of my life. Somewhat scared, scarred to be sure, but free of all the guilt that had been electroplated onto me by church and state. Now, though, someone was again accusing me of crimes against nature and God, and all the old fires were being stoked again. I said my mantra, but it had little effect. All I wanted to do was throw my so-called crimes and perversions directly into Mary Finney's face. It's no wonder that the art produced by a repressed culture is often so angry. And I was still left with the same questions I'd started out with. Who killed Dan Dougherty? Was Trex DeLorean's death at the reception really meant for Dan, or for Prentice Kingsley? Why did the killer switch from poison to a gun? Could John Lowe kill a person the way Danny had been killed? Could anyone? Would he have done something like that just to reinstate his claim to the Kingsley estate? It didn't seem a sufficient motive for that kind of killing. Mary Finney's religious vehemence almost seemed a more believable one, at least for the moment, while I was still hot for revenge. A Gay Mysteries audiobooks. I think it is easy to hate a label, but a face humanizes the word. So this effort is twofold: to offer comfort to those like myself that your world didn't end because you don't fit into the view of acceptable society on both sides, and in hopes of helping those with family that are LGBTQ, that it doesn't mean we are aliens from the child they once knew. Reassure them so they can maybe be supportive at the same time, being true to their values.